Before we begin, we'd like to ask you to tell us your name and the city you're watching from. We love getting to know our audience. Also, please don't forget to give this video a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. That way we can keep bringing you more stories like this one. The morning fog rolled thick across the Carolina coastline, swallowing the horizon in gray whispers. Gray Marrow stood at the helm of the Marrow's Ghost, his calloused hands gripping the worn wood as the ship creaked through gentle waters. The vessel was a relic. Weathered planks, patched sails, and a hull that had survived more storms than any crew. But there was no crew anymore. Just him. Gray was 53 years old, though the sea had carved him into something older. His face was leather stretched over bone, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, a gift from a mutiny 20 years past. His hair, once black as tar, had turned the color of ash, hence the name the coastal towns whispered. Gray Marrow, the ghost pirate who haunted the Atlantic's forgotten edges. He hadn't always been alone. Once there had been brothers in arms, shared rum, and dreams of treasure. But betrayal taught him a lesson the sea never could. Trust nothing that breathes. So he sailed alone, taking what he needed from unguarded docks, avoiding the law, avoiding people. The ocean was his only companion, and it asked nothing of him but respect. That morning, as dawn split the fog into golden fragments, Gray spotted something unusual drifting near the rocky shoals. Wreckage, splintered wood, torn fabric, and among the debris, movement. He squinted, adjusting the spyglass he kept in his coat. A woman. No, 4 figures clinging to a broken mast. Damn it all, Gray muttered, his voice rough from disuse. Every instinct screamed to sail past. Survivors meant questions, authorities, complications. But even a ghost pirate had once been a man, and some instincts refused to die. He maneuvered the Marrow's Ghost closer, dropping anchor 30 yards from the wreckage. The rowboat he lowered into the water was as battered as everything else he owned, but it held. Gray rowed with powerful mechanical strokes, his jaw set, already regretting the decision. The woman saw him first. She was in her late 30s, dark hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with exhaustion and something fiercer, determination. She clutched 3 girls to her, the oldest maybe 14, the youngest no more than 6. Their clothes were torn, lips blue from cold, but they were alive. "Please," the woman gasped as Gray drew alongside. "My daughters." "I can see that," Gray interrupted, his voice flat. "You gonna talk or you gonna climb in?" The woman didn't argue. With trembling hands, she helped the youngest girl into the rowboat first. The child had blonde curls and wide blue eyes that fixed on Gray with unfiltered curiosity. He avoided her gaze, steadying the boat as the middle daughter, maybe 11, with her mother's dark hair and wary expression, climbed in next. The oldest girl moved with surprising strength, helping her mother before settling herself, her green eyes assessing Gray with the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "Thank you," the woman whispered, as Gray began rowing back to his ship. "Our boat, the storm last night." "Don't care," Gray said, though it wasn't entirely true. "You're alive. That's what matters." The youngest girl sneezed, and Gray felt an unwelcome pang in his chest. He pushed it down, focused on the rowing. The Marrow's Ghost loomed ahead, dark and silent, a vessel that looked like it belonged to a ghost story. The woman stared at it, and Gray saw the moment she understood what kind of man had saved them. "You're a pirate," she said quietly. "Not a question." "Was," Gray replied. "Now I'm just a man with a ship." He helped them aboard, the wooden deck groaning under the unfamiliar weight of other souls. The girls huddled together, shivering while their mother stood straight despite her exhaustion, her eyes meeting Gray's without flinching. "My name is Catherine," she said. "Catherine Wells. These are my daughters, Emma, Sophie, and Lily." She pointed to each in turn, the oldest with green eyes, the middle child with cautious intelligence, and the youngest still staring at Gray like he was the most interesting thing she'd ever seen. "Gray," he said, because there was no point in lying. "You'll stay below deck. There's blankets, some dry clothes that might fit. Food's not much, but it's there." "We don't want to be trouble," Catherine began. "Too late for that," Gray said, but his tone had lost some of its edge. "Storm's passing, but these waters are rough. I'll get you to the nearest town by tomorrow. Then you're someone else's problem." Catherine nodded, gathering her daughters and guiding them toward the stairs leading below deck. But before she disappeared, she turned back. "Thank you, Gray. Whatever your past, today you're a good man." Gray said nothing. He'd stopped believing in good men a long time ago. Below deck, the girls explored the cramped quarters with the resilience of children who'd learned to adapt quickly. Gray's cabin was sparse: a hammock, a trunk of clothes, navigational charts scattered across a table, and the smell of salt and old wood. He stayed topside, giving them space, but he could hear their voices drifting up. Sophie's quiet questions, Emma's protective responses, and Lily's laughter, bright and unexpected, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Gray gripped the wheel, jaw tight. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow they'd be gone, and he'd return to the silence he'd earned. But as the afternoon sun burned away the fog and the sound of a child's laughter echoed across his ship for the first time in decades, something in Gray Marrow's chest shifted, something he'd thought long dead. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, indifferent and eternal. But for the first time in 20 years, Gray wasn't sure he wanted to face it alone. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of fog as the Marrow's ghost cut through calm waters. Gray kept his course northeast toward the small fishing town of Harwell, a place remote enough that questions wouldn't be asked, authorities scarce. He'd drop the woman and her daughters there, resupply if he could, and disappear back into the vastness of the Atlantic. Simple, clean, alone, as it should be. But nothing about the situation felt simple. Catherine emerged from below deck around midday, her hair still damp but braided back, wearing one of Gray's old shirts that hung loose on her frame. She'd found trousers from somewhere, rolled at the ankles, and despite everything she'd been through, she carried herself with a dignity that made Gray uncomfortable. She reminded him of someone, a memory he'd buried deep. "The girls are resting," she said, approaching the helm where Gray stood. "Sophie's already asleep. Emma's keeping watch over Lily, who won't stop talking about the pirate ship." A faint smile touched her lips. "She thinks this is an adventure." "It's not," Gray said flatly, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "I know." Catherine leaned against the railing, studying him with an openness that made him want to turn away. "But sometimes children see magic, where we only see survival. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." Gray grunted, adjusting the wheel slightly. The wind was favorable, steady. They'd make Harwell by morning if it held. "Where were you headed?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "Before the storm?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the weathered wood of the railing. "North, to my sister's place in Virginia. My husband—" Her voice caught and she stopped, swallowing hard. "He died 6 months ago. Fishing accident off the coast of Charleston. The boat he worked on capsized. They found his body 3 days later." Gray's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't want to hear this, didn't want to know. "I'm sorry," he said, the words foreign and awkward in his mouth. "We had nothing left in Charleston," Catherine continued, as if she needed to say it out loud, needed someone to hear. "His debts, the house, everything went to pay what he owed. My sister offered us a place to start over. We bought passage on a small merchant vessel, but the captain was reckless. When the storm hit last night, he panicked. The ship broke apart on the rocks. We were lucky to grab onto that mast." She turned to face Gray fully. "You saved our lives. I don't care what you were or what you've done. That matters. Don't make me into something I'm not," Gray said roughly. "I saw people drowning. I pulled them out, that's all." "That's everything," Catherine replied softly. Before Gray could respond, a small voice called from the stairs. "Mama?" Lily appeared, clutching a frayed blanket Gray vaguely remembered storing in the trunk years ago. Her blonde curls were wild around her face, and she looked at Gray with those two bright blue eyes. "Captain," she said solemnly, as if testing the word, "are there sea monsters?" "Lily?" Catherine began, but Gray surprised them both by answering. "No," he said. "Just big fish and rough water. The real monsters walk on 2 legs." Lily processed this with the seriousness of a 6-year-old philosopher. "My papa walked on 2 legs. He wasn't a monster." Gray felt something crack inside his chest. "No," he agreed quietly. "I suppose he wasn't." "Can I steer?" Lily asked suddenly, pointing at the wheel. "Absolutely not," Catherine said firmly. But Gray found himself stepping aside slightly. "Put your hands here," he instructed, guiding Lily's small fingers to the worn grips. "Feel that?" The ship talks through the wheel, tells you where the wind wants to go. Your job is to listen and guide, not fight. Lily's face lit up with concentration, her whole body leaning into the task. Catherine watched, something unreadable in her expression, and Gray felt exposed in a way no sword or storm had ever made him feel. Emma appeared next, followed by Sophie. The older girl hung back, arms crossed, studying Gray with the same wary assessment as before. Sophie, however, moved to the railing, looking out at the endless water with wonder. "It's so big," Sophie whispered. "Does it ever end?" "Eventually," Gray said, "but I haven't found the edge yet." "Maybe there isn't one," Sophie suggested. "Maybe it just goes on forever and that's okay." Gray had no answer for that. The philosophy of an 11-year-old girl had just unraveled something he'd believed for years, that everything had boundaries, endings, limits. That isolation was the only honest state. As the afternoon wore into evening, the girl's presence transformed the ship. Lily asked endless questions about knots, sails, and stars. Sophie discovered Gray's collection of charts and studied them with quiet fascination. Even Emma, suspicious and protective, eventually asked about navigation, and Gray found himself explaining how to read the sun's position, how the stars guided sailors home. Catherine cooked, somehow finding Gray's meager supplies of salted pork, hardtack, and dried beans and turning them into something that resembled an actual meal. They ate on deck as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Gray sat apart as always, but he watched them. The way Catherine ensured each daughter ate before she did. The way Emma helped Lily break apart the tough bread. The way Sophie smiled when her mother stroked her hair. This was what he'd lost. What he'd convinced himself he never wanted. "Tell us a story, Captain," Lily demanded after dinner, curled up against her mother's side. "I don't know stories," Gray said. "Everyone knows stories," Lily insisted. "Please?" Gray looked at Catherine, who simply raised an eyebrow. "Your choice." He sighed, leaning back against the mast, and to his own surprise he began to speak. "Once," he said slowly, "there was a man who thought the ocean was freedom. He left everything behind. Family, home, the life people said he should want. He sailed for years, taking what he needed, answering to no one. He thought he was free." Gray paused, staring at the darkening sky. But freedom and loneliness looked the same from a distance. Took him too long to learn the difference. Lily had fallen asleep before he finished, her head on Catherine's lap. Sophie and Emma listened intently, and when Gray fell silent, Emma spoke for the first time that evening. "Did he ever learn?" she asked quietly. "The difference?" Gray met her green eyes, so much older than her years. "Don't know yet," he admitted. "Story's not finished." Catherine smiled, sad and knowing, and carried Lily below deck. Sophie followed, but Emma lingered a moment longer. "Thank you," she said simply, "for saving us, for being kind even when you don't want to be." Then she was gone, and Gray was alone again under a canopy of stars that suddenly seemed less distant, less cold. Tomorrow they'd reach Harwell. Tomorrow this strange interlude would end. But tonight, for the first time in decades, Gray Marrow didn't feel like a ghost. He felt dangerously, terrifyingly alive. Dawn broke over Harwell with a pale, hesitant light that seemed to question its own arrival. Gray had been awake for hours, as he always was, watching the coastline emerge from darkness like a secret being reluctantly revealed. The town was exactly as he remembered, a collection of weathered buildings clinging to the shore, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and the kind of silence that came from people who minded their own business, because they expected the same courtesy in return. Perfect for a quick goodbye. Gray anchored the Marrow's ghost in a secluded cove just south of the main harbor, close enough to reach town on foot, but far enough to avoid immediate attention. He'd give Catherine enough money for passage north, point her toward the coach station, and be gone before the sun climbed too high. Clean. Final. But when he turned from securing the anchor line, he found Catherine already on deck, watching him with an expression that suggested she knew exactly what he was thinking. "We'll be out of your way soon," she said quietly, pulling her borrowed coat tighter against the morning chill. "I know you want to move on." "It's not personal," Gray said, which was only half true. "This life, it's not meant for passengers, especially not children." "I understand." Catherine moved closer, her voice dropping. "But Gray, before we go, I need to ask you something. The girls and I, we have nothing. My sister's farm is still 300 miles north, and I'm not even sure she can take us in anymore. It's been months since I've heard from her." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I can work. I can cook, mend sails, clean. I'm strong. And the girls, they're good. They won't be trouble. I just need time to figure out where we go next." Gray felt the trap closing, felt the weight of responsibility he'd spent 20 years avoiding. "Catherine, a week," she said quickly. "Just 1 week. Let us stay aboard while I make arrangements. You can drop us anywhere along the coast after that. Please, Gray. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance." Behind her, the girls emerged from below deck. Sophie and Lily looked sleepy and small in the morning light, but Emma stood tall, her green eyes fixed on Gray with that same assessing gaze. She knew her mother was bargaining for their future, and the weight of that knowledge aged her beyond her 14 years. Gray looked at them, this widow and her 3 daughters who'd crashed into his carefully constructed solitude like a storm he hadn't seen coming. Every survival instinct screamed at him to say no, to give them money and directions and nothing else. But when he opened his mouth, different words emerged. 1 week, he heard himself say. After that, you find another way. The relief on Catherine's face was so profound that Gray had to look away. Lily let out a small cheer, and even Emma's expression softened slightly. Only Sophie remained quiet, watching Gray with an intensity that reminded him uncomfortably of himself at that age. Too smart, too aware of how fragile everything was. "There's conditions," Gray added gruffly. "You stay below deck when we're near other vessels. You don't talk about me or this ship to anyone. And if trouble comes, and it might, you do exactly what I say without question. Understood?" "Understood," Catherine agreed immediately, and the girls nodded. "Good. Now stay here. I'm going into town for supplies. I'll be back before noon." Gray took the rowboat to shore, his movements automatic, his mind elsewhere. Harwell hadn't changed in the 3 years since he'd last docked nearby. Same rutted dirt streets, same smell of fish and tar, same weathered faces that looked without seeing. He kept his head down, his collar up, and moved through the general store with efficiency, trading silver coins for dried goods, fresh water, and news. The storekeeper, an old man with rheumy eyes and loose lips, was happy to talk. "Bounty hunters came through last week," he said, bagging Gray's purchases. "Looking for pirates, smugglers, that sort. Said there's been increased activity along the coast. Navy's getting serious about cleaning up these waters." Gray's blood ran cold, but his expression remained neutral. "That so?" Yeah. They're offering good money, too. $500 for information leading to any known pirates." The old man leaned in conspiratorially. "You hear about Gray Marrow? The ghost pirate? Supposedly still out there, though most folks think he's dead or myth." "Probably both," Gray said, handing over exact change. "Thanks for the supplies." He left quickly, his mind racing. Bounty hunters, Navy patrols. The net was tightening, and he'd just agreed to keep 4 civilians aboard his ship for a week. He should have known better. Should have stayed away from Harwell entirely. When he returned to the Marrow's ghost, he found the ship transformed. Catherine had somehow organized the chaos of his quarters, cleaned the deck, and was now working on mending a torn section of sail with surprising skill. The girls were helping, Lily sorting rope by size, Sophie carefully coiling lines, and Emma up in the rigging checking for weak points with the confidence of someone who'd grown up around boats. "Your father taught you that," Gray observed, watching Emma work. She glanced down, nodded once. "He said every sailor should know their ship inside and out, that your life depends on understanding what holds you up." "Smart man," Gray said, and meant it. Over the next 3 days, a routine emerged that felt both foreign and strangely natural. Catherine proved invaluable. Her cooking improved dramatically with fresh supplies. She patched more than just sails, and she had a way of organizing Gray's chaotic navigational notes that actually made sense. The girls adapted to ship life with remarkable ease. Lily appointed herself assistant captain, following Gray around and asking questions he found himself answering. Sophie discovered his small collection of books, water-damaged novels and maritime journals, and read voraciously, often sharing interesting passages aloud during meals. Emma, meanwhile, learned knots, sail management and navigation with a hunger that reminded Gray of his younger self, before betrayal had taught him to stop reaching for anything. But it was the evenings that undid him. After dinner, as the sun set and the ocean turned dark, they'd gather on deck. Catherine would hum old songs while mending clothes. The girls would play quiet games or listen to Gray's reluctant stories about places he'd sailed, carefully edited to remove the violence and theft that had funded those journeys. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge like promises the universe had forgotten to break. On the fourth night, as Lily dozed against his side, when had that become acceptable? Catherine spoke softly. "You're good with them. With her especially." Gray looked down at the sleeping child, her blonde curls tickling his arm, her small hand curled trustingly against his weathered coat. "I'm not good with anyone." "You're wrong," Catherine said. "I've watched you this week, Gray. You're patient. You teach without condescension. You listen when they talk. You're—" She paused, searching for the right word. "You're present. That's rarer than you think." "Don't," Gray said roughly. "Don't make this into something it's not. In 3 days you're gone. This—" He gestured vaguely at the peaceful scene. "This is temporary. Everything is temporary," Catherine replied. "That doesn't make it meaningless." That night, Gray stood watch alone, as always, but sleep eluded him. He thought about Catherine's words, about the way Lily called him captain with absolute faith, about Emma's growing smiles, about Sophie's quiet observations that cut straight to truth. He thought about the week's end approaching like a deadline he'd set for himself, a boundary he needed to maintain. And he thought about the bounty hunters in Harwell, about Navy patrols, about the past that never stayed buried as deeply as he hoped. On the fifth morning, Gray woke to Sophie's voice calling urgently from topside. "Gray! Captain Ships!" He was on deck in seconds, spyglass in hand. 2 vessels on the horizon, moving with purpose. Not merchant ships. Too fast, too deliberate. His stomach dropped as he focused the lens and saw the flags. Navy patrol boats. Catherine appeared beside him, Emma and Lily close behind. "Are they looking for you?" Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Probably," Gray admitted. "Or they will be once they get close enough to identify this ship." "What do we do?" Emma asked. Gray lowered the spyglass, his mind calculating distances, wind speed, options. He could outrun them maybe, but not with 4 extra souls aboard affecting his maneuverability. He could try to hide in one of the coastal inlets, but patrols knew those waters as well as he did. He could fight. No, absolutely not. Not with children aboard. Or he could do what he'd sworn he'd never do again. Trust someone other than himself. "Catherine," he said, turning to face her squarely, "I need you to listen very carefully. This ship is known. If they board us, if they identify me, you and the girls become accessories. They'll take you in for questioning at best, hold you as leverage at worst. So here's what's going to happen. I'm taking the rowboat to shore. I'll lead them away, inland. You take the girls below deck and stay hidden until they leave. Once it's safe, take the ship north to your sister's place. My charts show you the route." "Absolutely not," Catherine said immediately. "We're not stealing your ship." "It's not stealing if I'm giving it to you," Gray shot back. "And you're not leaving me a choice. Those ships will be here in less than an hour. This is the only play that keeps everyone safe." "Mama," Emma said quietly, urgently. "He's right." But before Catherine could respond, Lily stepped forward, her small face set with determination that looked absurd and heartbreaking on someone so young. "No," she said firmly. "Families don't leave each other. You said so, Mama. After Papa died, you said we stay together no matter what." Gray crouched down to her level, his weathered face gentle in a way it hadn't been in decades. "Lily, I'm not—" "You are," Lily interrupted, and Gray saw tears streaming down her face. "You're family now. You made us soup. You taught me stars. You let me steer. That's what family does. And family doesn't run away." Gray looked up at Catherine, saw tears in her eyes too, saw Emma's jaw set with stubborn loyalty, saw Sophie nodding in quiet agreement, and he realized with terrible clarity that somewhere in the past 5 days, he'd stopped being alone. He'd stopped being a ghost. He'd become something far more dangerous. Someone who belonged. "All right," Gray said, his voice rough with emotions he'd forgotten how to name. "Then we run together. Everyone below deck. Secure everything. This is going to get rough." As the patrol boats drew closer and the Marrow's ghost heeled hard into the wind, Gray Marrow made a choice he'd sworn he'd never make again. He chose not the ocean's indifferent freedom, but the terrifying, precious weight of protecting something that mattered. He chose family. The Marrow's ghost cut through the water like a blade, every sail taut, every line singing with tension. Gray stood at the helm, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The two Navy patrol boats were gaining, faster, newer vessels built for exactly this kind of chase. But Gray had something they didn't. 50 years of knowing these waters like the lines on his own palms, and a reason to survive that burned hotter than any he'd felt in decades. Below deck, Catherine had secured the girls in the reinforced storage hold, the safest place on the ship if things went wrong. Gray could hear Lily's muffled questions, Catherine's soothing responses, Emma's steady voice helping to calm her younger sister. The sound anchored him, reminded him what was at stake. The patrol boats were close enough now that Gray could see figures on deck, could see the officers pointing, conferring. They'd recognized the Marrow's ghost, no question. The only advantage Gray had was the approaching inlet at Crowley's Bend, a narrow passage between jagged rocks that required perfect timing and nerve most captains didn't possess. "Hold on down there," Gray shouted as he angled the ship toward the inlet. The rocks loomed on both sides, dark and unforgiving, close enough that Gray could see barnacles crusting their surfaces. Behind him, the patrol boats slowed, their captains unwilling to risk their vessels in the treacherous passage. He emerged into a wider bay, bought himself maybe 10 minutes. His eyes fell on the northern shore where thick fog always rolled in from the marshlands this time of morning. Gray adjusted course, pushing the Marrow's ghost toward the fog bank. The patrol boats tried to cut him off, but Gray tied off the wheel, ran to adjust the sails personally, coaxing every possible knot of speed from his aging ship. The Marrow's ghost plunged into the fog, and the world became nothing but gray and the sound of water against hull. Gray steered by instinct and memory, navigating shallow sandbars that shifted with every storm. The patrol boats, unfamiliar with these waters, had to slow or risk running aground. 20 minutes later, Gray emerged from the fog on the far side of the bay, the patrol boats invisible behind the gray curtain. He anchored in a hidden cove and went below deck. Lily ran to him immediately, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I wasn't scared," she lied transparently. "I knew you'd keep us safe." "We're not safe yet," Gray said honestly. "They'll keep looking." "Then what do we do?" Emma asked. "We can't run forever." "No," Gray agreed. "There's a place, an old friend's place up the coast about 40 miles. Jack Moreno. We served together before things went bad. He got out, went legitimate, runs a boatyard now. If anyone can help us disappear, it's Jack." "Us?" Sophie asked quietly. "You're coming with us?" Gray met 4 pairs of eyes. Catherine's dark and steady, Emma's cautiously hopeful, Sophie's wise beyond her years, and Lily's absolutely certain. "Yeah," Gray said. "I'm coming with you." They sailed through the night, arriving at Jack Moreno's boatyard just after dawn. The place was sprawling, docks lined with vessels in various states of repair, warehouses filled with supplies, and a large house overlooking it all. Jack himself appeared as Gray was tying off, and his breath caught. His old friend had aged, hair gone white, face weathered, but eyes still sharp. "Gray Marrow," Jack said, smiling despite his shock. "I heard you were dead." "Disappointed?" Gray asked. "Relieved," Jack replied, then stopped as Catherine and the girls emerged on deck. His eyebrows rose. "What kind of trouble are you bringing to my door?" "The permanent kind," Gray admitted. "Navy's looking for me. I need help, Jack. Not for me. For them." Jack looked at Catherine, at the 3 girls, at the way Lily held Gray's hand with absolute trust. Something in his expression softened. "Come inside. Let's talk." Over breakfast, Gray explained everything. Jack listened without interruption, occasionally glancing at Catherine and the girls, his calculating mind already working on solutions. "All right," Jack said finally. "Gray Marrow the pirate is wanted, hunted, finished. But Thomas Gray, widowed father of 3 and his new wife Catherine looking for work at a legitimate boatyard? That's a different story. Identity change. Papers can be drawn up, records created, past histories buried. It's not cheap and it's not fast, but it can be done." He looked at Gray. "Question is, can you do it? Can you stop being the ghost pirate and become just a man?" Gray looked at Lily, who smiled at him with absolute faith, at Sophie, who watched with quiet hope, At Emma, whose guarded expression was slowly opening to trust. At Catherine, who'd somehow seen past the ghost to the man underneath. Yeah, Gray said quietly. I think I can. The next 3 weeks transformed everything. Jack's connections came through. Papers were forged, stories constructed, pasts carefully erased. The Marrow's ghost was repainted, renamed the Catherine Rose. Gray's distinctive appearance was altered with careful barbering, different clothes, glasses he didn't actually need. Catherine and the girls integrated into the boatyard community where Jack introduced them as family friends. And slowly, impossibly, Gray Marrow disappeared. In his place emerged Thomas Gray, quieter, calmer, a man learning to build instead of take, to stay instead of run, to love instead of survive. 6 months later, Gray stood in the boatyard at sunset, watching Emma teach Lily how to tie a proper bowline while Sophie read aloud. Catherine approached, slipping her hand into his. Any regrets? She asked softly. Gray thought about the ocean, about the freedom he'd chased for decades, about the isolation he'd convinced himself was protection. Then he looked at his family because that's what they were now, and felt something he'd thought lost forever. Peace. Not a single one, he said. That night, Jack joined him on the dock with 2 bottles of beer. You did good, Jack said. Better than I thought possible. I got lucky, Gray replied. They gave me a reason to stop running. No, Jack corrected. You gave yourself permission to be saved. The past stays buried as long as Thomas Gray stays visible, present, real. I'm not going anywhere, Gray said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Inside, Lily had woken and was calling for him. Dad? Are you there? I'm here, Gray called back. I'm right here. For the first time in 50 years, Thomas Gray understood the difference between freedom and belonging. Freedom was the ocean's endless horizon, vast and cold and indifferent. Belonging was Lily's sleepy smile, Emma's growing confidence, Sophie's thoughtful questions, and Catherine's hand in his. The lone pirate had found his harbor, and the shipwrecked widow and her 3 daughters had found the family they'd needed all along. Outside, the ocean rolled eternal and indifferent, but inside, the house was warm with voices, laughter, and love. The kind of treasure no amount of gold could buy and the only kind worth dying for. Or better yet, the kind worth living for.